In 1842, at a Kentucky estate almost 90 miles from Mammoth Cave, an enslaved young man sat down and reconstructed an underground world from memory. His name was Stephen Bishop. He had no modern survey instruments in front of him, no electric light, and no printed master map to copy. What he carried was a mental record built through years of walking. Tourists beneath central Kentucky, junction after junction, river after river, narrow crawlways opening into chambers so large that a torch could not reach the ceiling. The drawing that emerged was later published with his name across its title, A Map of the Explored Parts of Mammoth Cave, by Stephen Bishop, one of the guides. It traced miles of passage and helped define the cave for decades. The achievement is often told as a miracle of memory. But the deeper story is more difficult. Bishop was famous enough for visitors to request him by name, knowledgeable enough to impress scientists, and trusted enough to lead white travelers through absolute darkness. Above ground, the law treated him as property. His exploration increased the value of an attraction he did not own. His map became part of a commercial guidebook, while his own voice survived mostly through people who possessed him, hired him, watched him, and wrote about him. So 3 questions matter. How could Bishop hold such a vast cave in his mind? How accurate was the map he produced? And what does it mean that one of the great achievements in early American exploration was created by a man who was not legally free? To answer them, we have to enter Mammoth Cave as Bishop knew it, not as a national park, but as a dangerous business built on black labor. Human beings had entered the Mammoth Cave region thousands of years before Stephen Bishop. The National Park Service documents prehistoric indigenous exploration extending deep into passages now included within the park. Those earlier visitors mined minerals, carried cane torches, and left material evidence that modern archaeology can still study. The 19th century industry around the cave was different. During the War of 1812 era, Mammoth Cave became valuable as a source of nitrates used in producing saltpeter, a key ingredient in gunpowder. Enslaved African Americans performed much of the difficult work underground. They moved soil, operated leaching equipment, and labored for long hours in cold, smoky darkness. When the saltpeter market collapsed, the cave did not stop being profitable. Its value changed. It became a tourist attraction. Travelers came by coach over difficult roads to see a place promoted as one of the natural wonders of the United States. They needed guides because the cave could not be understood by simply walking forward. It branched. Passages doubled back. Floors dropped away. Underground rivers blocked routes. The weak flame of an oil lamp revealed only a small circle of stone. The guide therefore controlled almost everything that made the visit possible. He decided the pace. He carried lights. He recognized landmarks. He knew where a ceiling lowered, where a ledge narrowed, and where a tourist could become separated from the group. He also created the experience through stories, names, staged lighting effects, and carefully timed moments of darkness. This authority was real, but limited. The enslaved guide could command a visitor underground while remaining legally subordinate above it. Historian Peter West has warned against turning this contradiction into a comforting story about slavery providing unusual freedom. Practical authority inside the cave was not legal power. It existed because owners needed skilled men to protect customers and expand the attraction. Stephen Bishop entered that system in 1838, probably while still in his teens. Franklin Gorin, who owned both Bishop and the cave property, placed him there as a guide. 1 year later, physician John Croghan bought Mammoth Cave. Bishop was transferred with the property. A cave, buildings, land, and a human being changed ownership in the same transaction. That fact must remain beside every account of Bishop's brilliance. His opportunity to explore was inseparable from coercion. He could become the cave's greatest expert because the institution of slavery determined where he lived, what work he performed, and who benefited from it. Bishop learned quickly. The surviving descriptions do not give us a diary of his training, but they show the result. Franklin Gorin later remembered him as self-educated, intellectually curious, humorous, reliable, and knowledgeable about geology. Visitors reported that he absorbed scientific language from the professors and physicians he guided. One account praised his prodigious memory. Another said he could remember the people who had visited and the specialized terms he heard from them. Those accounts were written by white observers and require caution. 19th-century travel writing often exoticized Bishop's appearance, treated his intelligence as a surprise, or turned him into part of the attraction. Yet the repeated testimony does establish something important: travelers did not regard him as a porter who merely followed a memorized trail. They recognized him as the person who understood the cave. His expertise grew through repetition. A guide might walk the same major route again and again, but no two trips were identical. Water levels changed. Lamps failed. Visitors tired at different speeds. Some wanted geology, others legends, others physical danger. Bishop had to recognize location from shape, slope, airflow, sound, moisture, and sequence. He also named places. The surviving tradition credits him with features such as River Styx, Lake Lethe, the Snowball Room, and passages beyond the section earlier tourists knew. The names mixed classical references, physical descriptions, and the humor of a working guide. Naming was not a decorative act. It transformed a confusing network into a chain of memorable places. A named chamber could be recalled, described, sold to tourists, and placed on a map. The cave itself became a language. A route was not only distance. It was the order of experiences: the rotunda, a narrow avenue, a sudden drop, a river, a turn, a dome. Bishop's memory appears to have organized the system through relationships. This passage meets that chamber. This branch lies beyond that obstacle. This river connects these sections. That kind of relational structure would become the foundation of his map. 2 Beyond the bottomless pit. One obstacle divided the known tourist cave from the passages that made Bishop an explorer. It was called the bottomless pit. The name was theatrical, but the danger was genuine. The pit opened across the route, creating a break that earlier visitors generally did not cross. Later retellings disagree about exactly how Bishop first reached the other side. Some versions describe a cedar pole. Others describe ladders laid across the opening. The dramatic details grew as the story was repeated. The core claim is better documented. Gorin later wrote that Bishop was the first person to cross the bottomless pit and that the crossing opened access to extensive cave beyond it. The National Park Service likewise credits Bishop and a visitor with passing the obstacle and making further exploration possible. Crossing the pit changed the scale of the known cave. Bishop moved into passages where the established tourist script ended. He encountered new avenues, domes, rivers, gypsum formations, tight crawls, and junctions whose relationship to the entrance had to be preserved in memory. Exploration underground is different from walking across an unmapped surface. A traveler cannot orient by a horizon, sun, or distant ridge. A cave passage may curve gradually enough that direction changes without being felt. Two routes can pass above or below one another without touching. A river can make a direct line impossible. Bishop did not merely remember a string of attractions. He had to remember choices. At every branch, a map begins as a decision, left or right, descending or level, dry or wet, wide or narrow. Each choice leads to another. If the sequence is lost, the explorer does not simply misplace a chamber. On paper, he may lose the route home. The risk gave Bishop's knowledge immediate value. He became a guide whom visitors requested and an explorer whose discoveries could be added to the cave's advertised wonders. By the middle of the 19th century, one observer wrote that he was almost as widely known as the cave itself. That fame did not make him free. It made him commercially indispensable. The phrase, mapped from memory, can make Bishop's work sound mysterious, as though he saw the entire cave at once inside his mind. The surviving evidence suggests something more practical and more impressive. In 1842, Bishop visited Locust Grove, the Croghan family estate in Louisville. There, away from the cave, he drew the explored passages from memory. The finished map was published in Alexander Clark Bullitt's guidebook and credited directly to Bishop. No surviving first-person explanation tells us exactly how he drafted it. We should not invent a scene of him drawing every line perfectly in a single sitting. He may have revised sections. Others may have assisted with preparing the drawing for publication. Lithographers converted the original into a printable image. The document we see is therefore both Bishop's intellectual work and a commercial printed artifact. What can be studied is the map itself. It does not resemble a modern instrument survey. Its scale and orientation are not consistently precise. Passages expand, contract, and curve according to the information Bishop considered important. Yet the branching relationships are remarkably coherent. Major routes meet where they should. Rivers and 3 obstacles occupy meaningful positions. Water is marked differently from dry passage. The map communicates how the cave fits together. This is called topological accuracy, preserving connections even when exact angles and distances are imperfect. A subway diagram works in a similar way. It may straighten curves and compress miles, but it remains useful because the order of stations and transfer points is correct. Bishop's map was not merely a memory trick. It was a model designed by someone who understood which facts a traveler needed. The drawing also contains evidence of prioritization. Thick lines and prominent labels emphasize traveled routes. Smaller branches preserve side passages and possible continuations. The map does not give equal visual weight to every piece of stone. It represents the cave as a guide used it. A network with principal avenues, memorable obstacles, destinations, and leads. This distinction matters because memory is selective. A useful mental map does not preserve every wall. Texture. It compresses repeated experience into decisions and landmarks. Bishop's map is impressive. Not because it reproduces the cave like a photograph, but because it selects information that allows one location to be understood in relation to another. The map also reveals how repeated guiding can create an internal survey. Each tour reinforced sequences. Each new exploration attached an unfamiliar branch to a known landmark. Each name gave a location a verbal hook. The result was not photographic memory. It was disciplined spatial expertise, built through labor. If careful, evidence-based history is the kind of storytelling you value, consider subscribing. Bishop's Map. is extraordinary, but the next question is harder. Whose voices created the legend that surrounds it? Stephen Bishop left no known autobiography. Most of the written archive comes from white owners, tourists, journalists, and authors. That imbalance shapes what we can know. Visitors described his clothing, his speech, his humor, his physical appearance, and his performances. Underground. Some admired his intelligence. Some repeated his explanations of geology. Some presented him as a celebrity. But their writing often transformed him into a character in their own experience. Mammoth Cave tourism was theatrical. Guides controlled torchlight to create stars on the ceiling. They extinguished lamps to produce absolute darkness. They told stories, sang songs, and managed fear. Tourists sometimes changed into protective cave clothing before descending. Writers then turned the journey into Gothic entertainment for readers who might never visit Kentucky. Peter West's study of this literature shows why praise alone is not enough. White travelers could celebrate Bishop's authority in the cave while accepting the institution that denied him authority over his own life. His knowledge was exciting partly because the social arrangement seemed inverted. Underground, a black enslaved man directed white travelers through a dangerous world they could not navigate without him. Once the tour ended, the normal legal order returned. This is why some popular details must be separated by confidence level. Bishop's map, his guiding, his exploration beyond the bottomless pit, his fame, his wife Charlotte, his son Thomas, and his eventual freedom are supported by strong records. Other stories grew less securely. Claims that he discovered for every object later associated with him, or that he secretly used the cave for underground railroad operations, lack adequate confirmation. Even the familiar portrait of Bishop is not a photograph taken from life. It is a later engraved image. It may preserve an artistic tradition about his appearance, but it should not be treated as an exact visual record. The archive gives us fragments through other people's eyes. The responsible approach is not to discard those fragments. It is to name their limits. Bishop can be recognized as an exceptional explorer without pretending that fame rescued him from slavery. He can be honored without converting him into a flawless legend. In fact, the contradictions make his achievement more historically important, not less. The published map did more than preserve knowledge. It sold an experience. By the 1840s, Mammoth Cave was entering a national market for spectacular places. Guidebooks described routes, chambers, underground rivers, unusual animals, indigenous remains, and the failed tuberculosis settlement established by Dr. Croghan. Newspaper pieces and travel narratives carried the cave to readers who might never reach Kentucky. The attraction depended on a carefully managed tension. Visitors wanted danger, but not abandonment. They wanted darkness, but also the confidence that someone knew the route. They wanted a place that seemed untouched by civilization, while expecting food, lodging, lamps, transportation, and a guide who could turn stone passages into a sequence of memorable scenes. Bishop supplied that confidence. His name functioned as a recommendation. Travelers asked for him because previous travelers had praised him. His discoveries supplied new destinations. His names made those destinations marketable. His map made the expanding cave appear knowable enough to visit while remaining large enough to inspire awe. This commercial setting helps explain why an enslaved man received visible credit. Putting Bishop's name on the map strengthened the publication. He was already part of the cave's reputation. The credit recognized real authorship, but it also advertised access to the celebrated guide. That does not make the attribution meaningless. It makes it historically complicated. The cave business presented Bishop as exceptional while relying on a legal system that treated him as transferable property. Tourists could marvel at his intellect without demanding that he control the wages and opportunities created by it. The national fascination with a famous enslaved guide did not automatically become opposition to slavery. This is one reason the documentary record can sound admiring and dehumanizing in the same paragraph. A writer might praise Bishop's memory, then describe his race and body as part of the cave's exotic scenery. Another might repeat his scientific explanations, then discuss his possible sale or freedom as though planning the future of a useful employee. Bishop was not merely caught between fame and obscurity. He was caught between two kinds of visibility. His expertise had to be visible because the business needed it. His claim to full personhood had to remain limited because slavery required it. Bishop's map covered roughly 10 miles of explored passage, although estimates differ depending on how its lines are measured and which branches are counted. It included routes known before his arrival and large sections associated with the expansion of exploration during his years as a guide. Its strengths are visible in the pattern. Junctions form a network rather than a decorative maze. Distinctive chambers and rivers sit in recognizable relation to one another. The map shows an understanding that Mammoth Cave was not a single tunnel but a system. Its weaknesses are also real. Direction is distorted in places. Distances are uneven. Vertical relationships are difficult to represent. Some passage lines are schematic. No compass bearings, measured survey stations, or elevation calculations accompany it. Calling the map accurate therefore requires precision. It was not an accurate modern survey. It was an unusually effective topological map created under conditions where even maintaining direction was difficult. For decades, it remained an important representation of the cave. Later surveyors introduced instruments and more systematic measurements, but Bishop's work had already changed the central question. Mammoth Cave was far larger and more interconnected than early visitors understood. The map's title matters as much as its lines. Bishop was credited by name. Stephen Bishop, one of the guides. In an era when enslaved black labor was routinely made anonymous, that public attribution is significant. But credit did not equal ownership. The guidebook belonged to the commercial world surrounding the cave. The discoveries attracted visitors. The map promoted the property. Bishop's knowledge increased the economic value of an enterprise controlled by enslavers. This is the central contradiction preserved on the page. The printer could identify him as the mapmaker, while the law denied him control of the mapmaker's life. Fame without freedom. By the 1850s, Bishop had spent much of his life at Mammoth Cave. He guided visitors from across the United States and Europe. He married Charlotte, an enslaved woman connected to the Croghan estate. And they had a son, Thomas. His work required trust. Cave owners allowed him to take paying customers miles underground, often for hours. Visitors depended on his judgment. Scientists respected his observations. Yet the freedom that came automatically with the surface for those customers did not belong to him. John Croghan died in 1849. Bishop eventually became free in 1856. The National Park Service records that he and his family moved to land near the cave. His period of legal freedom was brief. He died in 1857, still a young man, from causes that remain uncertain. The sequence is stark. Nearly 2 decades of expert labor under enslavement. 1 year of freedom. Then death. Decades later, a gravestone was placed above him in what is now called the Old Guide Cemetery. The stone helped preserve his name, but even the memorial carried error. It gave a death year later than the date accepted by modern park history. 6. That mistake feels symbolic, but it should not be turned into poetry too quickly. Bishop's life is already powerful without embellishment. The record is incomplete because 19th century America preserved far more documents about property than about the inner lives of people held as property. We know what visitors thought of him. We know what an owner wrote after his death. We know the map survived. We do not know what Bishop privately believed while drawing it. We do not know whether he considered the map a path toward recognition, a duty assigned to him, a professional achievement, or all three at once. The silence belongs in the story. In September 1972, modern explorers connected the Mammoth Cave system with the Flint Ridge system. The discovery established a single mapped network of more than 144 miles at that time and confirmed Mammoth Cave as the longest known cave system in the world. Today, the mapped total exceeds 426 miles, and exploration continues. Later cave historians noticed something remarkable on Bishop's old map. Near the Echo River region, a thin passage lead pointed in the direction of the eventual connection. He had not drawn the entire route. And he could not have known the scale of the system that modern cavers would assemble. Water conditions and later changes made the area difficult to pursue from the Mammoth side. Still, the line showed that Bishop had carried the cave's unanswered possibilities onto paper. This detail is sometimes exaggerated into a claim that he predicted the 1972 connection or mapped the modern cave system more than a century early. That goes beyond the evidence. The modern connection depended on generations of exploration, formal surveys, and work from the Flint Ridge side. The defensible conclusion is narrower and stronger. Bishop preserved a real lead in the correct region. His memory map recorded not only established tourist routes but the frontier of what he had observed. A map is usually judged by what it closes, uncertainty converted into lines. Bishop's map is also important for what it left open. The unfinished branches told later viewers that the cave continued. The thin line toward Echo River became a visual statement that the known cave was not the whole cave. The strongest facts can now be separated from the legend. Stephen Bishop was an enslaved guide who arrived at Mammoth Cave in 1838. He became one of its most important early explorers. He crossed a major obstacle associated with the expansion of the known cave. Visitors repeatedly recognized his knowledge, memory, and skill. In 1842, he drew a map of the explored passages from memory at Locust Grove. The published map credited him by name. Its measurements were imperfect, but its network of connections was sophisticated enough to remain historically valuable. He did not map the full modern cave. He did not work free from assistance or publication processes. We do not possess his own written explanation of the method. Several dramatic stories attached to him remain unverified. None of those qualifications diminishes the achievement. 7. The map demonstrates what expertise can look like before instruments formalize it. Bishop knew the cave through movement, repetition, naming, danger, conversation, and responsibility. He converted embodied knowledge into a diagram other people could use. It also demonstrates how slavery consumed knowledge. The system did not only exploit physical strength. It exploited observation, memory, personality, scientific curiosity, courage, and judgment. Bishop's owners benefited from all of them. That is why the story should not end by saying that he overcame slavery through talent. He achieved extraordinary work while slavery constrained his choices and captured the value of that work. Recognition and exploitation existed at the same time. The 1842 map remains a challenge drawn in ink. It asks who is allowed to be remembered as an explorer, who receives ownership of discovery, and how much history disappears when the person with the greatest knowledge leaves almost no record in his own voice. Stephen Bishop once described Mammoth Cave as grand, gloomy, and peculiar. The phrase also fits. The history surrounding him, a grand intellectual achievement, created in darkness, inside a social order, whose contradictions remain peculiar only if we forget how ordinary they once were. So the final question is not simply how he remembered the cave. It is this: should Stephen Bishop be remembered primarily as a brilliant cartographer, a foundational American explorer, or as evidence of how slavery converted black expertise into someone else's property,